Is anyone here for the first time today?
Me?
You. Okay. Someone? Wow, okay. So special welcome to you. It's always nice to have newcomers in our... Usually it's on a Sunday we do these programs. For example, in the temple where I live in Zurich, this program takes place every Sunday for the last 45 years. And some they do it on Saturday, like here. And this is a tradition in our ISKCON, this institution. And we will hear a little bit today how Srila Prabhupada, he emphasized so much this point of coming together and exchanging love. That's why he called it the love feast. So I was, Jani Prabhu kind of gave me a free pass to speak about what I would like to speak. And we might think that's good and that's nice, but I always feel it makes it more difficult. Because our philosophy is so wide and there's so many nice topics we can speak about, and then I always get a little bit confused. What should we say? And I thought I will not make it so philosophical today, because I'm not, even though Jani Prabhu said I like to study the books, yes, to some extent, but I don't think I'm a Brahmin. A Brahmin means someone who likes to intellectually study books all day long. I can do it for some time, but it's not my primary nature. So I thought I would just like to speak a little bit about Srila Prabhupada, and then we can read something from his books. So coming to Berlin, it's, as I mentioned, even though I have been to quite a few temples now in the past few years in my Krishna Consciousness, but Berlin somehow I never made. And even though it's much closer to Zurich than other temples I've been to, and it's always very enlivening to come to new temples and see, especially to meet devotees. It's always very enlivening to meet others who practice Krishna consciousness and who are inspired in the spiritual life. And so I was thinking this morning maybe to speak about something that inspired me this year when I went to Mayapur. Mayapur is a holy place in India, and we have many holy places. India is full of holy places. Those who are from India know every village has some history connected to the Puranas which make the place holy. And in our tradition we have mainly two, maybe three places: Mayapur, Vrindavan and Jagannath Puri. And I've been to Mayapur. And on the way to Mayapur, what I try to do whenever I have the chance, I try to visit places connected to Srila Prabhupada. It always gives me a lot of inspiration in my service. Now I'm serving as a temple president, means I'm full-time engaged in the institution. And just as a devotee in general, it's always so inspiring to me to see, connect to Srila Prabhupada's life and legacy. And this time, even though I visited many places, this time I visited a few new places, a little bit unknown places connected to his life. And somehow, never like before, I became aware of the fact how extraordinary Srila Prabhupada is and what he has achieved. Like the fact that we are sitting here today and speaking about Krishna and chanting his names. Later on there will be prasāda. That's mostly the favorite of many. This is all due to Srila Prabhupada's mercy alone. And again, it's not only here in Berlin, but you can go in any country almost in the world and you find many such centers, such communities of people who dedicate their lives to his teachings. And it might look a little bit, it might happen that we take it for granted in our life, that yeah, this is all here, and it's we forget what's behind. And this time again, when I went to India and visited these places, I became aware that Srila Prabhupada, he struggled so hard for us to sit here today and be fortunate enough to know about Krishna. So I will read now the verse from the Nectar of Instruction. This is a small book, one of the smallest books Srila Prabhupada gave to us. And he gave it a little later in his life, in 74, if I remember correctly, maybe even, I think even later, 76. But he says in the introduction that this book should help all the practitioners to advance in the spiritual life. And this is the verse number 4 in this book. It only has 11 verses, Sanskrit verses, and I'm going to read number 4 and a little bit of the purport, and then we can speak. Dadāti pratigṛhṇāti guhyam ākhyāti pṛcchati bhuṅkte bhojayate caiva ṣaḍ-vidhaṁ prīti-lakṣaṇam. Offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prasāda, and offering prasāda are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. Purport. In this verse, Srila Rupa Goswami, this is a sage in our tradition, explains how to perform devotional activities in the association of other devotees. There are 6 kinds of activities. 1. Giving charity to the devotees. 2. Accepting from the devotees whatever they may offer in return. 3. Opening one's mind to the devotees. 4. Inquiring from them about the confidential service of the Lord. 5. Honoring prasāda or spiritual food given by the devotees. And 6. Feeding the devotees with prasāda. An experienced devotee explains, and an inexperienced devotee learns from him. This is guhyam, ākhyāti, pṛcchati. When a devotee distributes prasāda, remnants of food offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in order to maintain our spirit of devotional service, we must accept this prasāda as the Lord's grace received through the pure devotees. We should also invite pure devotees to our home, offer them prasāda, and be prepared to please them in all respects. This is called bhuṅkte, bhojayate, caiva. Even in ordinary social activities, these 6 types of dealings between 2 loving friends are absolutely necessary. For instance, when one businessman wishes to contact another businessman, he arranges a feast in a hotel, and over the feast openly expresses what he wishes to do. He then inquires from his business friend how he should act, and sometimes presents are exchanged. Thus, whenever there is a dealing of prīti or love in intimate dealings, these 6 activities are executed. Yesterday we were invited in a whole program. Some of you were there too. And Srila Prabhupada, of course, he says we should invite the pure devotees. And I think nobody would consider himself a pure devotee in this assembly. But this kind of exchange happened yesterday, and it just came to my mind when I read through it before that this program yesterday was a very wonderful example of what Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada speaks about in the purport. So basically, in this small book, Rupa Goswami, he's explaining to us how we can practice spiritual life. Of course, there's many different understandings what is spiritual life, and maybe for some of you who are here for the first time, you probably could be that you have a different understanding how to practice spiritual life. Sometimes you hear spiritual life means you go in a seclusion. You know, we hear about the mystic yogis in India, they actually, the fundamental practice is to isolate yourself. You go alone to a place and you try to limit, to minimize your worldly activities. And this is mostly for many, even for myself, before I came to ISKCON and heard Srila Prabhupada's teachings, that's probably what I would have considered spiritual life. However, our line gives a completely different approach to spiritual life. It's not an exclusive approach, but it's an integrative approach. We try to integrate whatever we can in spiritual life. So we try to see the divine in everything. That's what we try to do. So for example, we eat, we have to eat, and instead of saying food is something material, we try to spiritualize food. Or we like to sing and dance, most of us at least. Instead of just saying, no, this is materialistic and it's not good, we try to spiritualize them. We like philosophy, we like to think about subject matters. Instead of eliminating it, we try to spiritualize. And in this way, everything in life can be spiritualized. And this Rupa Goswami, even though it's only 11 verses, he's very concisely giving us the practice of Bhakti Yoga. He's, in one verse, putting full stress on how we should deal with other devotees, and not only other devotees, but other people. How to spiritualize our relationships, our exchanges. And he speaks about the prīti, the love. That there is a way how we can transform our relationships from being selfish, where we like to only take, exploit, to actually giving. Now, one interesting point, he speaks in this verse about two aspects, giving and taking. So initially when we hear that, it's a little bit, how can taking be a loving exchange? In our understanding, taking is selfish. But that's not true. Taking is also part of the loving exchange, and it's a service. If we facilitate the loving exchange by taking. Of course, there always needs to be both sides. If I only take, then something will be missing. But the point is that even taking in the right consciousness, it can be a service. One time I heard one person telling me about, I'm not even sure if it was a study or something. If you move in a new flat, in a new place, what's the easiest way to make friendship with? You come in a new environment, you don't know your neighbors, you don't know anyone. What is the easiest way to make relationship with people? And what came out in this question is that if you ask someone for help, meaning if you take, that was the easiest way to make relationship, because inherently we all like to help others. We like to extend. And that this is, if you go to a new place, then what you can do, you can ask your neighbors. Is it mine? Let's try. Another example, this morning I was thinking, Prabhuji, what is your name again?
Shyamlal Das.
Shyamlal Prabhu. Yeah, Shyamlal Prabhu, he likes to ask questions. At least I have this experience. This morning he asked a question, and he reminded me yesterday that some years ago in an online class I gave, he asked questions. And then I got some faint memory of him. And especially when it's asked in such a sweet mood like Shyamlal, you know, he's trying to take something, no? He's trying to get some answer. But it's not at all, it doesn't feel at all like a burden. It feels like, wow, it's a loving exchange, you feel inclined. So in this way we can understand that it's two-sided. And Srila Prabhupada explains here in the purport briefly that that's not only in the spiritual world, but even in the material sphere, that kind of exchange, and particularly these examples, food, conversation and gifts, that's always there, it's universal, it's not only. And we see in our culture, gift giving, you know, on Christmas, if you don't bring a gift, then the loving exchange doesn't happen. And food is still a very important aspect. I'm going to jump a little bit forward now and read again from Srila Prabhupada's purport. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness has been established to facilitate these 6 kinds of loving exchanges between devotees. This society was started single-handedly, but because people are coming forward and dealing with the give and take policy, the society is now expanding all over the world. We are glad that people are donating very liberally to the development of the society's activities, and people are also eagerly accepting whatever humble contribution we are giving them in the shape of books and magazines dealing strictly with the subject matter of Krishna consciousness. We sometimes hold Hare Krishna festivals and invite life members and friends to participate in the feasting by accepting prasāda. So that's what we are doing also today. Prabhupada makes a very striking point in the purport. He says, and now I want to connect to how I started off going to India in February, and I went to places in Delhi and Kolkata where Srila Prabhupada, before he started the movement in the West, he was living. And I think some of you don't know Srila Prabhupada. Since 1922 till 1966, for 44 years, he tried to establish Krishna consciousness, and for 44 years he basically didn't manage to. And it was a big struggle. I was in Delhi, and in Delhi I visited a place where he lived in an ashram, it's like a monastery. And there he got kicked out after 2-3 months, and he was homeless. In Prabhupada's biography, the chapter is entitled Crying Alone in Wilderness, and it said in this chapter that most probably that was the most difficult time of Srila Prabhupada in his whole life. It's described that his clothes, they had holes. He didn't really have proper clothes. He didn't have a home. And still, whatever money he got, he would take that money and print magazines. There is one person who was interviewed in regard to the biography who said that Swamiji, he was not Prabhupada called at the time, he would, I'm not even sure if he was sannyasi, maybe he was not sannyasi. He would come to this printer, you know, the person who had a printing press, and he would always struggle to pay his bills. But because this printer, he saw the sincerity in Srila Prabhupada, he could never refuse. And he mentions that often Srila Prabhupada would come in the early morning, and when he would ask Srila Prabhupada, did you have breakfast? He would say no. He didn't even have money to buy food, but he would go to the printing press. And so, and not really many people were interested also. It's not that he was printing and people were waiting outside in line. No, factory, nobody was interested. He was just trying, but nobody took the magazines out, and they just took it because he was very stubborn. And that was basically 44 lives. You know, he tried in many different ways, but he never succeeded. And then he came to America, and he came as a poor man. Still, he didn't have money, but somehow in America his whole movement started off, and Srila Prabhupada explains why. Of course, Srila Prabhupada translated books, he gave philosophy, but he acknowledges himself that the reason why the movement took off and grew is because of the loving exchange. And he says here quite clearly that this society was started single-handedly, but because people are coming forward and dealing with the give and take policy, the society is now expanding all over the world. Prabhupada, he started in New York. He had a small storefront, smaller than this place, smaller than this room. And what Prabhupada would do, he would start having love feasts there and invite people to come. And he would give the lecture, he would buy the groceries, he would cook himself, he would serve, and he would wash everyone's plate after. And he would wash the room, he would do everything himself. And what was that? That was a pure expression of his love. He was 70 years old, he was in a holy place in Vrindavan. He didn't have any selfish need to come to New York. We might think that we should go to New York, it's a city we should have been in this life, but Srila Prabhupada was an enlightened person. He knew that New York cannot offer him anything, but still he went because he was convinced that what's mentioned in the Vedic scriptures has to be given to humanity. And also he translated the books, and then out of love for the living beings, he started to explain to them the philosophy. And not only that, but he cooked for them. He really wanted them to feel happy and comfortable. And one of the early visitors of these times explains that he used to go to that Sunday love feast, and it went on for some weeks. And after some time he was thinking, you know, maybe we should ask the Swami if we can help something, because he's doing everything alone. So for weeks he was just doing everything alone, and nobody even thought about, maybe I can clean something. And then one devotee got this inspiration from within that maybe I can help something. So Prabhupada says here, they are coming forward and dealing with the give and take policy. He infected others. This disciple later on became a disciple. He saw, wow, Srila Prabhupada is just giving selflessly. He's not expecting anything, and he felt, maybe I can also follow his example and give something. And then Prabhupada gave him a service of washing the dishes. And then slowly, one after another, they took up service. One was rolling the chapatis, and another one was, collecting donations. Prabhupada didn't have money, and from that simple loving exchanges, today we have hundreds of temples all over the world, farms and schools, so many things from nothing, just on the basis of loving exchange. And the reason I wanted to bring it up, when I went to these places in India and reminded myself, then I went to Mayapur. And Mayapur, now they're building the biggest temple in ISKCON. That's a huge temple. I think it's the biggest dome in the whole, at least India, maybe even the whole world. And then you go there and you see this contrast. On one hand, you just saw this place in Delhi where Srila Prabhupada was kicked out, and then you went to a few places where he was lecturing and publishing his books, but you knew by reading the biography, you know that he didn't have a home, he was basically on the street. And then you go to Mayapur and you see this huge project. And you just feel, wow, Prabhupada is so amazing that through his endeavor he managed to build up such a thing which is even growing today. And the reason why it's growing, that's something we have to reflect on and understand, is because of this, is because of loving exchange. Unfortunately, we are conditioned beings, and being conditioned, we have a hard time to understand what means spiritual life. As a conditioned living entity, we understand what's material life, but because we are conditioned in our consciousness, we try to understand spiritual life by the glasses of our consciousness, of material consciousness. So then what happens sometimes, we come to Krishna consciousness in our material consciousness, and we behave in the same way, just we change our dress, we change some words, but basically the whole consciousness behind and the motivation is still material. And if we understand the point that, and what happens in the material world, especially our young generation, I feel, we get Hare Krishna. We get such a strong conditioning. We get trained from young that you need to be beautiful, you need to be rich, you need to be famous, you need to be very intelligent, and all these kind of things. Why? Because due to the social media, no, they're so superficial that often you just see the external, but that's how people interact to a large extent nowadays. By seeing a picture, by seeing a video, or even on YouTube, for hearing a person for a few minutes. And the tendency in this culture is that humans become very shallow. That because externally we are measured, then because we want to attract love in our life, we also behave in a way so that we get appreciation in this way. So that's a strong conditioning, especially for the young generation, but I think for everyone. And now when we come to spiritual life, we should try to overcome that conditioning. And we can do that by getting the taste of Krishna consciousness, meaning to sincerely practice devotional service. At least we should try to make an experiment, no? That, okay, in the books it is said that selfless service to Krishna and the devotees and Guru is actually what makes us happy. In the books it is said that, actually in this book it is mentioned later on, that we are like diseased. So even though spiritual life is meant to be very blissful, we are like patients who have jaundice, and those who have jaundice, if they eat some sweet, even though it's sugar and sweet, it actually tastes bitter on the tongue. It's not the sugar's fault or the sweet's fault, it's my tongue's fault, because I'm sick. I have to get cured, and once I'm cured, then the sweet will actually taste nice. Spiritual life is the same, that we need to make this experiment, even though initially it might be a little bitter, but I'm sure all of you who come here regularly, we make this experiment that if we do it, then we make this experiment, and it's something completely out of this world. It has nothing to do with getting pleasure through our senses and our mind, but it's happiness which is within. And it's not dependent on anything. It's not dependent how much fame we have, how much beauty we have, etc., how much money we have. And that's also why Srila Prabhupada was able to continue in this way for 44 years, even though, meaning he was practicing his whole life, but especially his effort to share Krishna consciousness. Even though externally there was no reason to be happy, there was a lot of reason to be unhappy, internally he felt so much pleasure just knowing that this is what pleases my Lord, this is what pleases my spiritual master, and that kept him going. And I'm sure he would have kept going for another 300-400 years if that was his destiny, because he was happy doing that. And I just jump now to the previous verse. I read one more short paragraph and then we can conclude. So in the previous verse, in this verse we heard how the loving exchanges take place, and now the previous verse, it's described how one should, some basic principles one should follow in order to cultivate Krishna consciousness. And I'm not going to go through the Sanskrit, I just read the translation. There are 6 principles favorable to the execution of pure devotional service. 1. Being enthusiastic. 2. Endeavoring with confidence. 3. Being patient. 4. Acting according to regulative principles. 5. Abandoning the association of non-devotees. And 6. Following the footsteps of the previous acharyas. These 6 principles undoubtedly assure the complete success of pure devotional service. So here, especially the first 3, he speaks about enthusiasm, he speaks about confidence and patience. And if you reflect about these qualities, patience and enthusiasm, they are quite contradictory. Usually when somebody is enthusiastic, then one is not patient. But Bhakti means you need to bring them together, because it's a long-term project. It's not happening within 1 second or a day or a week, but it's a lifelong cultivation. So you need to bring them together. You need to be enthusiastic and at the same time patient. And the only way how to do that is by being confident, by being faithful. That even though it might take long, but you're confident that I know if I continue, I will reach the goal. And Srila Prabhupada says something here connected to patience. Again, this book is very special also. Srila Prabhupada reveals a lot about, his own personal his heart, in a sense. He's revealing his own heart, which for us as his followers is very special. Endeavor executed with intelligence in Krishna consciousness is called utsaha, or enthusiasm. The devotees find the correct means by which everything can be utilized in the service of the Lord. The execution of devotional service is not a matter of idle meditation, but practical action in the foreground of spiritual life. So an important point that, again, I mentioned in the beginning, we have maybe an understanding of spiritual life being somewhere secluded in meditation, but Prabhupada says no. Spiritual life means you do something. And in fact, Srila Prabhupada translated Bhakti as devotional service. And if you go through his books, this term devotional service is one of the most used phrases. Why? Because he knew we'll have to hammer the point into our heads that you have to do something. And we all know our tendencies, we get slack, we get lazy. So he's doing that for our benefit. And now he's saying what I wanted to read specifically. These activities must be executed with patience. One should not be impatient in Krishna consciousness. Indeed, this Krishna consciousness movement was started single-handedly, and in the beginning there was no response. But because we continued to execute our devotional activities with patience, people gradually began to understand the importance of this movement, and now they are eagerly participating. Somehow, when I went to these places in India, and when I reflect about Srila Prabhupada's life, and when I reflect about my life, and I think Prabhu is practicing for quite a long time, and also a few others. I realized not so long ago, recently, that spiritual life is quite a marathon. Initially, you come, you're enthusiastic, and everything is new, and you go like a rocket, very fast. But after some time, you start to realize that you're still a human, and you have to deal with your conditioning, you have to deal with your environment, you have to deal with yourself. And then a tendency can come that we become impatient, and the history has shown many they lose confidence and enthusiasm, and they break away in their spiritual life. And I feel Srila Prabhupada, Krishna, he put Srila Prabhupada only through all these difficulties in order that we nowadays can read his biography, we can study his life, and we get encouragement. Imagine Srila Prabhupada, it would just happen like that. Then we would, even we in our service, I'm sure we who manage, sometimes there comes a lot of challenge. No, not at all. And we get impatient and we frustrated. Why should I deal with this? I can might as well just do something else. But then, when we hear of Srila Prabhupada, then we realize actually my problem is not really a problem. He was dealing with problems. I'm having a nice life here. I was just born in a wealthy situation, basically, to wealthy parents. And he was a poor son, we can say, who built up his own empire. And that's what I feel. And Prabhupada never boasted much about it. Sometimes he, in a very spiritual pride, he mentioned that actually nobody believed that this is possible, but I've done it. It's not a false ego, this is a spiritual ego. Because he always would say, actually, that my only qualification was I had full confidence in the words of my spiritual master. And that's exactly what is mentioned here. He was patient and enthusiastic because he has this confidence in the words of his spiritual master. So I wish you all the best in your spiritual life, and also to myself, because it's a marathon, and but I want to say, if we take simple things like studying Srila Prabhupada's life, Prabhupada Lilamrita, following Srila Prabhupada DVDs, listening to his talks, one page sometimes can get us going for another year. But if we don't do it, we might lose our drive. And if we invest more time in this, we actually develop also this sense of gratitude and what's the word? There is a nice indebtedness. And that's what we should especially strive for, that Srila Prabhupada did so much for me. Let me do something and give something back now. Let me also give something. I got so much I was taking, and this is also loving exchange. Prabhupada was able to give, devotees were able to give. But I would also like to see the other side. And in this way we can please Srila Prabhupada so much. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who has this desire. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'd like to end here. Maybe someone would like to add something, Prabhu?
Oh. Well, thank you so much. Resonated very much with what you just said, because I'm just now, I got the wonderful service of reading Yamuna Devi's Prabhu's books on analog devotion, and she also talks a lot about what you just said. She witnessed this Prabhupada in the struggle, and it's wonderful that you mentioned that, because I 100% agree that it is so wonderful to read from people who have been Krishna put Prabhupada through the struggle, that we can identify with that. Because it really helps to see that Prabhupada struggled and got through the struggle and got such wonderful results. I mean, we are all part of that result. So thank you very much. And also the point with taking, that is, I like that a lot. Because a lot of times it's easier to give than to accept. Yeah, and a lot of people, including me, have sometimes issues accepting good things from others. As you said, there's no reciprocation without give and take.
Yes.
Very important.
Yeah, it's true. This point of taking, I was also reflecting about it. The culture we have it shows a little bit. It can show that we are weak if we need to take, and we don't like to look weak. And with prasāda, I had a few experiences in the temple where newcomers, they came and they somehow feel uncomfortable initially with, no, I will serve you, and they, no, I can take myself, and they don't want to bother anyone.
Might be also, maybe, I don't know, nice intercultural discussion here. My father always quoted from the Bible, from Jesus saying that giving is more holy than taking. And I think that affected maybe some people with a Christian background.
Interesting.
And it is, and I always had that in my head, giving is more holy than taking. Also geben ist wichtiger denn nehmen. You probably know that saying.
Yeah, the Christian background. I mean, Europeans are very much shaped by the Bible, the biblical thoughts and Christianity. And yeah, would be an interesting discussion. One saying Prabhupada mentioned, a Bengali saying about, also you had this discussion how Srila Prabhupada went through this to teach us. The Prabhupada said there's a Bengali saying that the mother-in-law teaches her daughter-in-law by teaching her own daughter. You heard of that? Yeah. So in the Vedic culture, usually the wife, she will leave her parents' home and go to the husband's family's home, and then the mother-in-law is there, and she is different. She has a different, culture. Yeah, every house is a little bit different, and so now she wants to shape this as daughter-in-law according to her parampara. And she's not doing it directly because there will be some resistance, so she's teaching her own daughter in front of the daughter-in-law, and then by the daughter-in-law seeing that, she learns. And he used that saying that the Lord, he teaches the general people, like Arjuna. Arjuna was in illusion. He didn't want to fight, even though he was a pure devotee. Why? Krishna just wanted to teach the people by showing with Arjuna, his friend. Any question or comment? Yes, Prabhu, Krish, Prabhu.
Yes, I wanted to ask, like, we were talking about this marathon in spiritual life, like, so I know people, like, even me, everybody wants to become the best singer, the best cook for Krishna, but we are always entangled in this race. So, is this a good race or is this a bad race? To always think that I want to be better than this person, I want to cook better, I want to sing better. You always have this inner commotion.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it's Prabhupada says clearly, and that's from the spiritual descriptions. In the spiritual world, there's also competition, but it's never based on envy. It's always, maybe Prabhupada said jealousy. Jealousy means that, okay, he's doing good, I also want to do good, so then I try. But envy means he's doing good and you want to put that person down. That's not in the spiritual world. It's more like they both increase. So that's one point, and the other point is, yes, we should endeavor, but we should be open to every devotion service, not only leading kirtan or playing mridanga and giving class, but let me become the best pot washer as well. Let me become the best prasadam server. Let me become the best book distributor. It's also an austerity. Of course, there we can also go into an ego. The ego is always there, unfortunately, but if we are sincere, even though there will be ego, well, now I'm a manager. And 100% there is so much ego. But if that's my realization, if we remain somewhat sincere, then it will help to purify. Krishna will purify us. He will help us too. He will accept the good, and the bad he will slowly kick out more and more. So, but to be open, not that I choose my service always, but let's see, maybe somebody wants to give me a service. And then if somebody gives us a service, to endeavor to become the best possible. Bring it to that perfection. Okay. This one.
Thank you very much for your inspiring class. It was very inspiring, and I would like to ask you, do you know why Srila Prabhupada was kicked out in this temple in Delhi?
Yes. Yeah, you want to hear that? So Srila Prabhupada, he started the League of Devotees in Jhansi. You probably have heard about this. That was his first temple project. And then he was kicked out there. And then he went to Mathura. There was one of his godbrothers, Bhakti Pratigṛhṇāti, who later gave him sannyas. And he went to Mathura, and then he got a letter from another godbrother who lived in Delhi, who had a temple there. And Prabhupada got very popular about being a good editor and a good writer, even when he was a householder. And they knew that, so they were fighting for his service. They had different magazines, and both of them wanted to have him. And so then Prabhupada went to Delhi, and he became the editor-in-chief of this magazine. And Prabhupada once also, Prabhupada said, I have one disease, I cannot think small, I only can think big. And when he took over that magazine, he told to this devotee who started the magazine that I want to see this magazine as big as the New York Times magazine or something. Times magazine, I'm not even sure. And he said, I want to have photo pictures, I want to have this and that. And this devotee didn't like that. He felt it was nonsense that he tried to be so ambitious. And so Prabhupada pushed and pushed, and at one point he couldn't tolerate him anymore, and he told him, there's a letter also where he wrote to him, thank you so much for your service, and we very much appreciate you. Actually, we cannot cooperate with you properly, so please, you take another service now. And in a very polite way, they kicked him out. You had something to prove?
As you said very nicely, to have loving relation with devotees and everyone. But also, when there are certain situations where maybe you are in a certain position and managing some service, and then you have to set some standards or some rules for that, and when some others are not able to follow it or practice it, then it becomes a little the loving relation gets a little disturbed and it becomes very difficult, a challenge to set forth the things and at the same time not let the other person feel bad about it. So how do you see this?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is a challenge when we take a service where we have to correct others and make decisions and make enemies. Yeah, sometimes it happens. There is one practice in our movement which for newcomers it's very difficult to accept, but it's very powerful, is when you offer your obeisances to someone. And sometimes when we have to correct someone and we have to be, there is a fight, but Srila Prabhupada says also at some point, if you go afterwards and you put your head on the floor at the feet of that person and you forgive, and even, let's say you had to correct and it had to be done, the person did a mistake, but then maybe what you explain, you feel there is some grudge. Still you can go and offer your obeisances, I'm so sorry, I think I hurt you, and please forgive me, and you put your head on the floor. It's very difficult for that person to not forgive. And if we can do it, we also make a lot of spiritual progress, because we diminish our false ego, we practice humility. Yeah, but that can be done after you correct it, because in the moment you correct, you need to be a little strong, and then after, when the things are over, you can do that.
But then this person could think this correction was wrong and he regretted it.
Meaning the one who got the correction or the one who corrected?
The one who got the correction might think, could think, now he is asking for forgiveness, so this correction was maybe not.
Well, there's nicely mentioned also in the Prabhupada Lilamrita how Srila Prabhupada's father, and Prabhupada himself tells that story, that Gurmohan, his father, Prabhupada said at one point he knew from the birth who I was, that I'm not an ordinary soul. So, but still, Prabhupada was a child at some point, and even Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they were children, they did a lot of nonsense. And the father always has the duty to correct. But what Gurmohan would do, he would go to Abhay Charan and say, please don't mind, I am your father, it is my duty to correct you, and then he would correct him. So this gives a nice example that we can also, go, I'm sorry, I appreciate you very much. Sometimes we are even younger. I'm your junior devotee, you're my senior, but, and then you. Of course, now we spoke about when you pay obeisances. So both is possible, it just needs a little bit. And this impresses the devotee naturally. If you see you're strong, but you're not, it's not about, you're not on the ego. It's not about you or him, it's about the thing. Prabhu, you didn't clean. When you eat, you should clean the floor after. This is our rule. It's not against you, please just do it. It's not coming from me, it's coming from Srila Prabhupada. And if you see he's angry for 2 months, then you just go at some point and forgive. Okay, so do we have time? Yes. Yes.
So in this verse, fourth verse, there is a point of revealing one's mind and also hearing the other one's mind. So, but in a so we should have all the loving exchanges to have a good community. But it's difficult to reveal one's mind with everyone. So we can share our mind with some who are closer to us. So how do we see this? And also another part is that in ISKCON we hear a lot about devotee care. So how is that connected, or is it different than, how do we see that in this perspective, in the way of community also, and this verse?
Yes. Yeah, the first point you're mentioning, that it would be a little bit naive if I would sit here and just reveal all of what's in my mind. If I would do that, you would probably think, why is he giving the lecture? He's not qualified. because we are humans, and we have to discriminate between. Yeah, we have to be intelligent. When can I say what? And we need persons where we are like-minded with. Even amongst devotees, they can all be proper devotees, but even then there is differences. Not everyone is the same. In the spiritual world, not everyone is the same, and not everyone is so intimate with everyone. So how can we expect that we are all just, so that we should be very sensitive and understand whom can I confine in, and connecting it with this devotee care aspect. What is spoken about here is, if you have pure devotees, it will happen naturally, this exchange. Srila Radha Maharaj, he explains in one of his memories of Srila Prabhupada that when he was living in Vrindavan, I think, who has read Journey Home? Not so many. But he was living in Vrindavan now before he joined ISKCON, and he was a Baba, he had long hair, and he was very renounced. And then he got to know about Srila Prabhupada and the devotees. He got attached to Srila Prabhupada. There's the story in Bombay, he sat in the crowd and Prabhupada just told one, get him on the stage, and he could see he's not an ordinary soul. And then he went to Vrindavan, and then what Rama Maharaj liked to do, to go to Prabhupada's room and just sit there all day and listen and observe Prabhupada. And the ISKCON devotees, they thought he's in Maya, he should do some service. But Prabhupada protected him kind of, so he did that, and he describes at one point a god brother of Srila Prabhupada came, Srila Krishna Babaji Maharaj, who was a very exalted soul. He was just chanting all day long, and he would come, and Ramaj explains that what he witnessed when he came in was the most beautiful thing he's ever seen in his whole life. That for the first time he saw what love really means. And he describes the scene that when Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj came in and Prabhupada saw him, he jumped up immediately when he saw him, and he ran to the other side and he embraced him, and they both tried to touch their feet and give obeisances, and then they basically huggingly walked back to the place where Prabhupada sat, and then they sat down, and Rana Maharaj describes very nicely, he says, they basically sat on each other. They were so close. And they were speaking for a long time. He couldn't understand much, but he could feel that there was genuine love and openness and trust in all humility. And so that I'm saying this example because we need some systems, like, okay, you don't have taste for the holy name, chant 16 rounds. If somebody has a taste, you don't need. If you have love for Krishna and the devotees, you don't need to have a devotee care system. It will just happen naturally. So then we tried in ways how to bring this aspect in. Because if a devotee doesn't receive this love, he will dry out and eventually fall off from the path. So then we as leaders try to think in ways, how can we bring this into the lives of the practitioner of devotee care? And there's different approaches. Some say we should establish a culture, which again is more elevated. Culture means you do it on a voluntary basis. Nobody has to tell you, you are on the schedule now, you have to clean the floor. No, if it's a culture that we clean the floor, we'll just do it. Nobody has to tell me. But my experience in the temple is you need some structure and lists, and otherwise it will be chaotic. And so then devotee care can mean that you make it a system, that you tell devotees, okay, if you want to take up this path, you take initiation, you need to take someone as a mentor with whom you can talk confidentially, confine in. But the problem is, at least now that's my experience, a system is not very, it's not perfect. And if we don't understand the logic behind, then it will be very difficult to have really this loving exchange. And so we need to cure ourselves. I mean, I think for Indians, again, I have to praise our Indian-bodied audience. I feel you're very fortunate because you come from a culture where there's much more love and trust available. I just spoke to a student in Zurich from India the other day, and I asked him, so how is it for you in Switzerland? And he said, people are quite cold here. And yeah, it's true. We are much colder and reserved, and we don't have so much trust. I was in Vrindavan in last Kartik doing the Brahmachari and for those of you who have never been to Vrindavan, especially the newcomers, there you will experience things which you cannot imagine. You walk in a village and a person who you never saw that person, they don't know you, they will just grab you into their house, sit you down and cook for you and feed you, and they don't speak your language, but they just want to please you. And Keshav Maharaj was also there, and he made one very nice point. He said, the advancement of a civilization can be measured by how much trust is there between human beings. And see the level of trust if you didn't see anyone at any time, but you have so much genuine trust that you bring them into your house and serve them. And in the West it's very hard to imagine something like this to happen. And so what I want to say for Westerners especially, in order to have this exchange, we need to trust. The problem in the West is people got so much disappointment. I mean, I'm speaking a little bit straightforward, but that's the reality. When they are young, they see their parents and maybe the parents break up, they don't take care of them properly. So the first person they should trust, they lose a lot of trust. Then they come in school and maybe the teachers misbehave, friends, relationships, they get cheated, they get abused. And it can be, it doesn't always mean very gross, but in a subtle way. And often the experience is that when somebody comes to Krishna consciousness with 20, they are traumatized. And they need time to regain faith and trust. And also they need to learn how to relate to other people in a loving way. And it's a big subject matter. And in ISKCON we have devotees who specialize for that, to train devotees how to overcome these obstacles. So they become qualified to have a loving exchange. And that's ultimately if we are qualified, then no matter where we are, we will have loving exchanges. You sometimes hear devotees complain, nobody takes care of me, I don't have any. And in the same place you have someone who has a lot of care and love. So it boils down that it's the individual's situation. And that's our philosophy. We always have to look at ourselves, not blame others, but we have to see what can I do, not blame others. How can I situate myself in a way that what I need comes into my life? So that's how we can devotee care. No, we need these exchanges. I would encourage everyone to work on oneself, to become qualified to have loving exchanges with others. Thank you. So are we ready for that? Yes, dadāti. Thank you so much. And ISKCON Berlin ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Jai.